importance of technology and the role of globalization is crucial in understanding how society is developed. We see the effects of technology in commerce and transportation, evolutionary changes in language, the development of virtual communities, privacy issues in social networking, and accessibility across the globe. Globalization is a direct result of rapid implementation of technological advances, and as we will see, there are both negative and positive results that stem from this new multiverse. As a result, a critical analysis of the philosophical perspective of technology will address the advantages society has gained from technology as well as the potential dangers and detriment society faces as a result of our drive toward a technologically advanced society. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is Alex Frere, and here is our current flight schedule for the airline industry. We will be taking off from brief history to social impact very shortly once we receive the all clear from Central Command. Let us start our history on December 17th, 1903, Kitty Hawk, North Carolina, where brothers Wilbur and Orville Wright recorded the first flight with an engine-propelled aircraft. By the 1930s, airlines had expanded to include the services of commercial international flights. After a brief halt in commercial flights for World War II, the ICAO and IATA were formed to help companies like these conduct global business. Now let's direct our attention to how the airlines affect global society socially. We are going to analyze the social effects through benefits and sacrifices. The airline industry provides our global community with many social benefits. Let's identify the main three. First, social connectivity. Thanks to the airline industry, developed nations and underdeveloped nations can now connect easily. Underdeveloped nations need little infrastructure to operate. Social connectivity also generates cultural experiences. A study done at Indiana University says that long-distance travel can make you more creative and self-aware. Now, let's move to goods and services. In 2013, airlines shipped 50 million tons globally. This allows specialized nations to satisfy global demands due to the airline efficiency. It also facilitates humanitarian services such as the Red Cross or Doctors Without Borders. And of course, our last benefit, employment. The airline industry is responsible for almost 57 million jobs directly and indirectly. It is also responsible for almost 35 million tourism jobs directly and indirectly. Now that we've gone over the benefits, let's move to sacrifices. Social sacrifices on the global community. Health. According to the Journal of Environmental Health Research, the low humidity cabins in airplanes increase your chances of catching a cold by 100%. Other viruses such as tuberculosis, SARS, and Ebola have been spread through the airlines. Jet lag can also have serious health effects. Airplanes are one of the largest carbon dioxide polluters. In 2011, they emitted 670 million tons of CO2. They also burned 70 billion tons of jet fuel in 2013. Noise pollution can affect indigenous animals and lower land value. And our last social impact is something we know all too well, and that is accidents and tragedies. The airline industry's global economic outlook can be seen through the SWOT analysis I have conducted. First, we will analyze the strengths versus the weaknesses. Then, we will compare the opportunities versus the threats. After review of the SWOT analysis, one could assume that the reliance on innovative breakthroughs could help maintain a heavy use of the airline industry in the future, which would diminish the threat of rising gas prices. To put things in perspective, let's look at the airline industry as if it were a nation and compare it to other nations' economies in the world economy. Hey, Dr. Feenberg, you mind if I look out your window for a minute? Dr. Feenberg describes critical theory of technology through two defining characteristics. First is that technology is value laden. Feenberg explains that the values embodied in technology are socially specific and are not adequately represented by such abstractions as efficiency or control. And the second characteristic is that technology is humanly controlled. But Feenberg explains that the problem is not with technology as such, but with our failure so far to devise appropriate institutions for exercising human control over it. All right, Dr. Feenberg, why don't you take a look out my window and see if I understand this through the global communities in the airline industry? So let me get this right. If the airline industry was value laden, would that mean that the industry could serve as boundaries in which members of the global community could operate within? And when you say humanly controlled, you mean like how Southwest successfully promotes productivity, or how consumers can transform the industry with their capital? Or maybe you could even say human control over technology would just be the acknowledgement of future needs in the industry. So, Doc, it looks like the airline industry is here to see you for a lack of sleep and anxiety. That would explain the shortness of breath, cold sweats, and nightmares. What are you going to give them? Ah, 200 milligrams. Good idea, Doc. Hey, airline industry, don't forget that while in critical theory, be ready to innovate new industry standards, switch to alternative fuels, and most importantly, plan, develop, and expand future infrastructure. The largest areas of growth in the next 20 years will be in the country. English is not the native language. Language is important for the industry's future and the global community as a whole, which Lauren will now explain.
How we use language to communicate with each other defines who we are and constitutes so much of what makes a culture and an individual unique. We use language as the primary tool to draw a connection to each component of the varying combinations of mind, body, and experience. Similarly, technology functions by interpreting data and communicating its results. Technology has advanced and altered our culture, and it is necessary to examine how language has facilitated this new dynamic. From a historical perspective, we see how language progressed from Claude Schoep's invention of the telegraph to Samuel Morse's development of Morse code, to code words created within the mudding communities. As we learned this semester, ancient Greek philosophers used the term techne to describe tools that gave purpose. Tools like the telegraph and coding of sounds assisted in developing what we have today as email, instant messaging, and the preliminary foundations of social networking. Globalization would not have been possible without rapid implementation of effective communication. Taking a closer look, we consider how globalization has affected language. It is important to critically assess what language means to our culture. Language is the basis for all human interaction, and without it, we would not be uniquely human. Because technology has made the world a smaller place, we cannot ignore the evolutionary changes that technological advances have created. On one hand, we might consider if technology has devalued carefully crafted prose in favor of expediency of communication. On the other, through globalization and technology, we've been able to preserve endangered languages by reconnecting speakers from all parts of the world. There are approximately 6,500 languages in the world today, and of that total, 6% of the languages are spoken by 94% of the global population. 50% of the 6,500 will likely disappear or become unused by the end of the century. As previously mentioned, tools of globalization like the internet, so often blamed for homogenizing the world, are also encouraging diverse lingual communities to connect and even revitalize their endangered languages. Though there is stimulation for their use, there is also room for evolution and growth of new methods of communication. The internet has become an important linguistic medium and allows for a broadened amount of communication by integrating multiple interactive services like language translation, social media, chat platforms, and forums based on various topics and interests. Marshall McLuhan, a philosopher of communication theory, said that the medium is the message. What this means is that we may be able to know the nature or characteristics of artifacts by the virtue of the changes they affect. The medium is the message is a phrase sums up a deeper communication theory, which is that the medium through which we choose to communicate holds as much, if not more, value than the message itself. Technology and globalization have played a significant role in this philosophical concept. Concluding with a critical look at philosophical perspective, we will consider the views of three philosophers, Daniel Dennett, Jared Diamond, and Frederick Frey. In his book Consciousness Explained, Dennett discusses the importance of language and how it relates with the theory of the mind. He suggests that language bridges the gap between the multiple streams of data in the brain with the mind. It is then that the varying combinations of mind, body, and experience that can make a person can be validated as consciousness. In his book The Third Chimpanzee, Jared Diamond examines vervet monkeys and poses the question of human language origins and how evolution can help uncover its development. Diamond asserts that vervets, which are small African monkeys, demonstrates how efficient communication helps the species survive. Finally, Frederick Faure stresses the importance of language in examining the philosophy of technology by demonstrating the necessity of clear and direct lexicon. He suggests that distinguishing the definition of technology will allow for further avenues of philosophical study. These philosophical perspectives are important to globalization and technology because they each reveal the complex nature of language and its importance in understanding the foundation of humanity. Our ability to connect and communicate in all channels indicates an innate sense of drive for shared community. Renee will now discuss the importance of this community as it relates to technology.
Hello everyone, I am Renee, and I will be talking to you about virtual communities. Virtual communities are a type of global community in that they give people the opportunity to communicate and interact with others without geographical restriction. As opposed to traditional communities, which are based off of your physical location, a virtual community is a community of people that exists on the internet. Someone can be sitting at their computer in one location and speaking with others in very different cities, countries, or continents. Any person can participate who has access to the internet and who can speak the language used in that community. People exist within virtual communities by using avatars. An avatar is something that represents you in the community. In most online communities, it will not have any restrictions and can be anything. It can be a representation of your own physical self or a representation of something that you wish you could be. It could be male or female, an animal, or even a robot. It is up to the individual to decide how they want to represent themselves. And within the community, the avatar is the representation of yourself that you choose to be. In this way, virtual communities introduce a duality of oneself with the idea that who you are could be separate from your physical self, and you may never truly know who is on the other side of the avatars that you are interacting with. The first communities were purely text-based and could be seen developing in online news groups and on bulletin boards, where people communicated in an asynchronous manner. Then they moved to speaking in Internet Relay Chat, or IRC systems, which were simple chat rooms that allowed people to communicate in real time. Next to develop were fuller text-based worlds called MUDs, or multi-user dimension. One of the more famous MUDs is LambdaMu, which began in 1991. In these instances, being text-based meant that your avatars and actions were purely text. You interacted with the world and others via text commands and saw the result in text on your screen. As the technology continued to evolve, graphical-based virtual communities began to appear. One of the most famous ones is Second Life. Second Life debuted in 2003 and allowed people to create custom graphical representations of themselves and interact with others in a graphical virtual world. Instead of only seeing the people and the environment you are interacting with in your mind's eye, you can also see the graphical representation of them on the screen at the same time as your interaction. So what are some of the potential advantages and disadvantages of a virtual community? It enables communication without the boundary of geography. Those who wish to find like-minded others are not constricted by the places in which they live or their ability to travel to find others with similar interests. This allows those who feel alone or even like outcasts in their community to find others with similar interests and therefore no longer feel isolated. It can also work against society by allowing those who have ill intentions to find each other and potentially come up with and execute plans to cause harm. It also normalizes extreme thoughts by allowing a group to rationalize their other deviant behavior as a social norm because of so many other like-minded thinkers. It also affords users a sense of anonymity within the virtual community, keeping their online self separate from their physical self. Those people who want to explore different parts of themselves can do so online without any real-life consequences. It can be beneficial for those who do not feel as if they can be their real selves in their physical life, but can be their real selves online due to restrictions in their home life. For example, a gay teen can be himself online with his community of supporters when he knows if he was out at home he would be rejected, kicked out of the house, or harmed in some way. But on the flip side, anonymity can allow people to feel free to bully or otherwise cause harm to others knowing they are protected by the lack of connection to their physical self, which would make real-life consequences a remote possibility. Virtual communities also allow people to disconnect from their real lives. This allows them to assume a virtual life without the stressors and problems of their real life. While they are connected to the virtual community, they exist within that community and don't have to worry about their overdue bills, medical problems, family problems, or any other real-life physical issues that might be on their mind. But when people use this too much, they can ignore their real-life problems and avoid solving them for too long, causing irreparable harm to themselves and others. Addiction to virtual communities due to its use for escapism is a real issue for many people. The divide between the real and virtual self, hidden behind avatars, has lessened in recent years as the rise of social networking has grown in popularity. One of the main differences between virtual communities and social networking is the use of your real identity instead of an assumed identity. While there are some sites out there like Twitter that will allow you to assume an identity if you choose, there are also ones like Facebook that require or at least highly encourage you to use your real self. I will now pass it on to Arturo to talk more about social networking.
As we have learned, online virtual communities are revolutionizing how we interact with each other. Now I will talk about social networking and privacy issues. Here's a quick overview about what we will talk about today: a brief history of social networking, the birth and demise of GeoCities, enter Facebook, the social application Snapchat, what is happening to the youth in our global community, privacy issues with social networking, and proceeding with caution and asking the bigger questions. A brief history of social networking. Our earliest obsession with staying connected with each other electronically can be traced back to 1962. It was during this year that J.C.R. Licklider of MIT conjured up the idea of staying interconnected globally through the Intergalactic Computer Network. He felt that in doing so, we would benefit from accessing and sharing data with each other at a faster rate than previously done before. In 1965, Licklider was quoted as saying, "We need to substitute for the book a device that will make it easy to transmit information without transporting material." Eventually, the technology was further worked on, and by 1978, Licklider and his colleagues were experimenting and sending each other messages. The birth and demise of GeoCities. GeoCities was a web hosting service in 1994 that allowed its users to create web pages with little to no knowledge of coding needed. Initially, it was called Beverly Hills Internet, before it renamed itself GeoCities in 1995 and sold the idea that when you joined the service, you weren't just getting a web page, you were joining a community of users. The demise of GeoCities is not just the disappearance of a gaffe-riddled online ghost town, it's the death of a pioneering online community. Enter Facebook. The dot-com bubble was a stock market bubble that popped to near devastating effect in 2001. It was powered by the rise of internet sites and the tech industry in general, and many of these companies went under and learned some valuable lessons when the bubble finally burst. However, the burst gave birth to many incarnations of the social networks that we use today. One of them being Facebook, which was founded in 2004 and is the current leading and preferred social network site with 600 million users. According to Mark Zuckerberg, Facebook's mission is to give people the power to share and make the world more open and connected. The brand's popularity has allowed it to become a household name worldwide, not just in developed countries, but also in underdeveloped countries. However, all of this success has come at a high cost, instant gratification that is still being studied by leading analysts. The social application Snapchat. Snapchat is now the third most popular social application amongst millennials. It is a reimagining of the social network for the generation who grew up chastised over oversharing on Facebook and other social media platforms. Users can send a photo or a video snap to friends, chronicle their day through My Story posts, touch base using chat, and immerse themselves in global events through Our Story. Millennials are the youngest, most active generation of mobile social users, and their habits are setting the stage to be the new default for the generations that follow. What is happening to the youth in our global community? Legitimate concerns do exist about youth involvement on these sites. However, those concerns are grounded on two factors. One, the sites are attracting many teens, some of whom are not making good choices. Two, many parents are not paying attention to what their children are posting on these sites. Privacy issues with social networking. Privacy policies exist to inform the user using the website how a given company or network is going to protect their privacy. However, the length or language that is used by the authors oftentimes discourages users from reading the fine print and instead just forces them to agree to the terms. One problem with frequenting social networks is that they leave behind cyber footprints. The accumulation of personal information gathered by large private companies online has resulted in accelerating and rising ethical concerns among social psychologists. What these companies do with the information is analyze it to uncover hidden patterns, unknown correlations, market trends, along with other useful business information. Once companies have finished using your information, they can sell it to other third parties looking for potential customers. What's worse is that many of these companies' privacy policies are consistently changing to avoid giving users too much control of their own accounts. Although these issues continue to plague our social networking sites, many users prefer to overlook the privacy issue and rather just adapt to the social network's ever-changing policies. So one must proceed with caution. Beware of social mergers. Avoid using single access logins, as this kind of access will make it easier for a single social media website to show your actions and activities to other websites. And remember that no universal legislation exists. Turn off location-based services when necessary. In conclusion, we must ask ourselves these questions. How do we balance these privacy issues and benefits, reducing one and increasing the possibility of the other? Do all people have an equal need for privacy? Do some who are more vulnerable in some way need privacy more than others? Should individuals bear the responsibility of protecting their own privacy? And do social network users have any form of privacy once they have joined a social network? Or are all of their rights to privacy signed away once they become part of a social network? Now I will pass it off to Nicole, who will teach us about internet accessibility and the importance it is having on bridging our global communities.
Hi everybody, this is Nicole, and I'm going to wrap up our team's presentation and talk about accessibility to technology, specifically in rural communities and developing countries. Where are rural communities in developing countries? In America, we consider rural areas to have less than 2,500 people and an open territory. The Library of Congress considers a developing country one in which the majority of population makes far less income and has significantly weaker social indicators than the population in high-income countries. They also live on far less money and often lack basic public services than the population in highly industrialized countries. This brings us to the digital divide. What is the digital divide? Well, a couple of decades ago, that referred mostly to a lack in basic telephone services. Today, it's more about the gap in internet services, specifically broadband. So how have we bridged the gap in developing countries in the past and also in the present and moving forward? In the late 90s, there was a program called the Grameen Village Phones in Bangladesh, and basically the telecom company, which was Grameen Telecom, used two methods to extend phone access in rural areas. First, by providing phones directly to the subscribers, mostly which were businesses. And second, they leased phones to the bank members, who then provided services to the community on a fee basis, basically like payphones. The second group I want to talk about is called Nafundi. Nafundi is an organization that was formed by a friend of mine who's a graduate of the University of Washington. And their mission is to create technologies that improve the lives of the underserved. Their current focus is on designing, building, deploying, and supporting mobile data collection systems that work well in challenging environments, specifically in areas like rural villages in Kenya, rainforests in Brazil, and even the International Space Station. They are the original designers and developers of Open Data Kit. Open Data Kit replaces clipboards and paper forms with smartphones and tablets. And the children that you're seeing here in this picture are children in a rural area of South Sudan, and they're showing you the mark on their finger which shows that they were vaccinated for polio. And one thing that Open Data Kit has done to help in the eradication of polio is provided governments with smartphones and tablets to be able to go out and survey the people and survey the villages and make sure that everybody has been vaccinated, because that's the number one way of eradicating the disease, is to ensure that everyone is vaccinated. This process used to take months. They would send out surveyors with paper forms and clipboards, and it would take months to sort and organize the data. And now with this open data kit, this specific village here was surveyed in 2 days, one day which included training. So not only is it faster, but they're able to GPS each location, how many children were in each location, people, everybody. So it's taking huge strides in the eradication of polio. So what does the digital divide look like today in America? Well, today, 55 million Americans, or 17% of our population, do not have access to broadband. Rural America consists of about 41.5 million people, and 53% of those rural Americans, or 22 million people, do not have access to broadband. Additionally, there are about 4 million people who live on tribal lands in America. 63% of them do not have access to broadband. So what are the reasons? Some of the biggest reasons are cost, lack of education or low education, and homes without children. So, if there are no children, they're not going to school, and there's no reason that they have to have access. This brings us to the philosophy of accessibility. Doing the research for this project made me think a lot about when we talked about whether technology was autonomous or human controlled. And when you think about the strides that have been made in the developing countries, that's taken a lot of grassroots efforts or human control. And it seems as though with the very minimal increase in access each year over year, that the American philosophy is just let the market work itself out. And that doesn't seem to be working. There doesn't seem to be a lot of grassroots efforts in bridging the gap to access of broadband services. It also made me wonder if access is value laden or value neutral. Is access actually a good thing, or do we just think that it is because most people have it? And this concludes our presentation on technology in global communities. We hope you see the importance of technology and the role of globalization in areas such as commerce and transportation, evolutionary changes in language, the development of virtual communities, privacy issues in social networking, and accessibility across the globe. As we saw, there are both negative and positive results that stem from this new multiverse. And now you can critically analyze the philosophical perspective of technology and its potential effects not only on the global society, but on your own life. Thank you so much.